In a city divided by old prejudices, Lila Thompson, a black judge, takes on a corrupt system one trial at a time. Will her fight for justice ignite a storm that can't be stopped? On a gloomy morning in Savannah, Georgia, where the cobblestone streets were covered in moss and the early sunlight barely illuminated the old buildings, Lila Thompson stepped out her old sedan. It felt as though every eye around her was focused on her. Lila wasn't an ordinary person in this world. She was a judge and a black woman in a city still haunted by old prejudices. But today, standing before the grand door of the county courthouse, she felt like she had no power. It was as if she were a ghost, invisible, unnoticed by everyone. She looked through the courthouse's transparent windows. Groups of lawyers exchanged pleasantries. The security staff stood solemnly, but no one looked at her. A judge, someone with absolute authority in the courtroom. But today, Lila felt like she was just a passerby, someone who didn't exist in their eyes. Part of her ached because of this, while the other part could only swallow the bitterness inside. Lila had been a judge of Savannah County for 5 years. But even after all this time, she still faced discrimination from some of her colleagues and the people. They couldn't accept that a black woman could sit on the judge's bench in a system that had long been controlled by white men. But Lila knew she had to be strong. Every day, she had to face countless injustices, the judgment from people who didn't see her, simply because of the color of her skin. Today, she had a strange feeling, as if something was about to happen that she couldn't explain. She walked into the courthouse lobby, meeting a few security staff who smiled and greeted her politely. But in Lila's heart, things weren't that simple. She felt a vague unease, as if something was lurking, waiting to happen. Lila didn't know that, in today's trial, she would face a challenge that could change everything. Lila walked into the courtroom, where the air was thick with tension. She sat at the judge's bench, her sharp eyes scanning the room, stopping on the faces waiting for her ruling. The simple but sturdy wooden chairs surrounded by lawyers and court staff, all focused on today's trial. But there was one person who caught her attention, a police officer, Travis Bell, standing in the corner of the room with his arms crossed, his face scowling. Travis was someone Lila had encountered many times throughout her career. A police officer known not only for his strictness in his work, but also for his arrogant demeanor. Lila knew that he had a less than favorable opinion about her sitting on the judge's bench. She also knew that he wouldn't hesitate to show his contempt if given the chance. Travis walked up to the prosecutor's table, his gaze flicking over Lila with a blatant lack of respect. But Lila didn't blink. She maintained the poise of a judge. Part of her felt angry, but the other part whispered, "If he thinks he can easily push me down, he's wrong." She had spent her life fighting against discrimination, standing up for justice, and she wouldn't let anyone, even a cop, disrespect her again. The trial began, and Lila could feel the heavy air filling the room. A 16-year-old boy, James, was standing beside his defense attorney, trembling, his eyes wandering, full of fear. Lila looked into James's eyes, sensing his helplessness. She had seen many young people like him, those who were pushed into the wrong path by a justice system that had already judged them based on their circumstances and the prejudices they couldn't escape. But before Lila could speak, something unexpected happened. Travis, with an irritated look on his face, moved forward, ignoring Lila completely. He turned to the clerk and impatiently said, "Let's get this started. I don't have all day to wait." Lila felt her anger rising. She wasn't someone who would easily overlook disrespect, especially when it came from a police officer. She took a deep breath, trying to maintain control, then stood up from her bench. "Travis Bell," she said, her voice calm but firm, "perhaps you need to remember that this is a courtroom, and respect is a minimum you owe, not just to me but to the entire system." The room fell strangely silent. Travis looked directly at Lila, a flicker of confusion appearing in his eyes. But Lila refused to relent. She continued, her tone still soft but unwavering. "Do you think you can do whatever you please in this courtroom just because of your badge? I will not let your challenge go without consequences." Lila could feel her heart racing, the tension in the room building as if the air itself were thickening. She knew this wouldn't be easy, but she also knew that if she didn't act now, these prejudices would continue to haunt the pursuit of justice, and people like James would never escape. She stood her ground, eyes locked on Travis, waiting for his response. Lila didn't look away from Travis, the anger inside her reaching its peak. But before he could speak up in rebuttal, something unusual happened. A well-dressed man, with an air of authority, stepped into the courtroom. Lila didn't recognize him, but there was something in the way he entered that told her he was not an ordinary person. The door shut behind him, and the atmosphere in the room seemed to momentarily calm. He walked up to the judge's bench, looked at Lila, and spoke in a deep, assured voice. "Judge Thompson, I apologize for the interruption, but I think we need to address this matter right now." Lila looked at him with suspicion. Who was this man? And why did he appear right at the most tense moment of the trial? She nodded slightly, not thrilled by his sudden appearance, but the storm in her heart was beginning to rise again. No one was allowed to disrupt the pursuit of justice in this courtroom. "Who are you?" Lila asked, her voice calm but authoritative. He didn't hesitate to respond. "I am Michael Grant, an agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation." He presented his badge, but Lila did not see any urgency in his eyes. Something felt off, and she could sense the abnormality in everything that was happening. Michael glanced quickly at Travis, and Lila didn't miss the strange look he gave him. "Judge Thompson, I need to clarify a few things with Officer Bell. I believe what happened today is not just a simple matter as everyone might think." Lila took a deep breath, trying to suppress the growing confusion in her mind. She turned to look at Travis, whose confidence had now faded. It felt as if the world around her had suddenly shifted. Something was coming, and Lila could feel the storm approaching. "Michael," Lila said, her voice firm, "are you referring to Travis Bell's case?" Michael nodded, locking eyes with Lila. "Not just Travis, Judge Thompson. There's a much larger network being protected by powerful people in this city. And today, you are standing right in the middle of it." Lila felt the change in the air. She had faced difficult situations before, but this feeling, the sensation that a net had been cast around her, made her heart race. Michael Grant was not someone she knew personally or professionally, and what he was saying was no longer just about Travis. She knew, as a judge, she had to remain steadfast in the face of pressure, but now something bigger was waiting ahead of her. "Then I will not let this continue quietly," Lila asserted, her hands firmly placed on the desk, strong and confident. "If something larger is at play, I will expose it today. And no one will stop me." Lila stood tall, her gaze sharp as a blade, locking on to Michael Grant. She could feel the tension in the room rising, the space around her seeming to contract, as if something monumental was about to happen. Michael Grant, the FBI agent, stood before her with stern expression, but his eyes didn't seem completely honest. Lila knew that something bigger was unfolding, and she had to find a way to confront it. She turned her attention to Travis Bell, who was still sitting quietly in his seat, his eyes filled with confusion and fear. Travis, once seen as a model police officer, was now caught in a web of lies and manipulation. Lila felt a strange empathy for him, even though she knew this couldn't just be a misunderstanding. Michael Grant cleared his throat a few times, as if to bring the attention back to him, and then continued, "Judge Thompson, I need to make it clearer what's happening in this city. Cases like Travis's are just the tip of the iceberg. I am investigating an underground network that can make everyone rethink what they've trusted all this time." Lila felt the tension building. She looked at Michael, her eyes turning cold. "So, what I've been hearing isn't the truth?" she asked, her tone calm but carrying an undeniable strength. Michael paused for a moment before continuing. "You might not believe me now, but all I want is for you to help me uncover the truth before it's too late. This city is filled with too many secrets no one dares to touch, but I can't do this alone." Lila glanced around the room, where every eye was now focused on her. She realized that, despite her reluctance to face the harsh truth, she could no longer remain silent. The web of powerful connections had hidden these secrets for far too long, and now, perhaps, it was time for them to be exposed. "Michael, if what you're saying is true," Lila's voice grew solemn, "then we're facing a battle, and I'm not afraid to fight for the truth." She stood up, stepped away from the judge's bench, and walked toward Travis. Standing in front of him, she saw his face, filled with anxiety. But she couldn't afford to hesitate. Everything had to come to light. "Travis, I'll help you," Lila said, her tone firm yet compassionate. "But you need to be ready to face what's coming." Travis nodded, his eyes filled with fear, but also with a glimmer of hope. Lila turned back to face Michael, her gaze unwavering. "Now, Michael," she said, "let's get to the bottom of this." Lila walked out of the courtroom, her heart filled with tension and resolve. The city of Charleston seemed to be sinking into an uncontrollable firestorm, and now Lila had become an essential part of that battle. She watched as the figures of government officials hurried past, seemingly unaware that a major change was about to unfold within the heart of the city's power. Travis Bell, the man she had just worked with, still sat motionless in the waiting room. Lila's heart pounded, each beat seeming to tear apart the silence in the heavy air. She understood she would need to face difficult decisions at this moment, but her determination was stronger than ever. She glanced back at Travis one last time, then softly approached him. "Travis," she called gently, but her voice echoed in the stillness of the hallway. "It's time for you to choose. Stand with the truth or continue living in the darkness of lies." Travis looked up at Lila, his eyes cloudy but filled with fear. "Lila, I'm so tired. All I've done is follow orders. But now, facing what has happened, I'm no longer sure of anything." Lila placed her hand on his shoulder, feeling the weight in each of his breaths. She knew that not everyone could stand strong when facing painful truths. But if Travis couldn't do it, then no one else would. "You're not alone," Lila said, her voice soft but filled with strength. "Give me the chance to help you. We will face this together." She turned and walked toward her office, but her heart remained uneasy. Michael Grant, the man she had just clashed with in the courtroom, was now trying to influence every decision she made. But Lila wasn't afraid. She knew Michael might be a formidable opponent, but she had something he could never possess, a belief in justice and an unwavering determination not to back down. As she entered her office, the bright lights bathed her resolute face. She sat down at her desk, gripped the pen in her hand, and began plotting her next move. There was no time for doubt, no time for hesitation. Lila knew every passing second counted, and if she wanted to change everything, now was the time. She picked up her phone and made an important call. While waiting for the other end to pick up, Lila stared out the large window, her eyes sharp and determined. She knew this fight wouldn't be easy, but Lila was ready. The truth would be exposed, and she would be the one to open that door. After the call, Lila looked down at her desk, where reports and documents were piled up like undeniable evidence. She sighed, the tension in her chest feeling as if it would never fade. Everything, from her legal battle with Michael Grant to the threats from Travis Bell, was closing in on her, pushing her to a point of no return. While others were still caught up in their daily tasks, Lila knew that true change could only come when she faced the most painful truths. And that couldn't be done with words or speeches alone. She had to act. Lila stood up, glancing out the office window. The soft afternoon sunlight bathed Seattle in a beautiful glow, a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing within her. She couldn't shake the terrifying silence when Travis had admitted that he was just following orders. Lila had once thought that justice was only about determination, but now she realized that sometimes justice required the courage to face fears head-on. Determined, Lila made her way out of her office and quickly walked toward the reception area. There, one of her longtime staff members, Danny, was busy with his usual tasks. Danny was the only one she trusted throughout her years working here. Unlike others, he always upheld his commitment and integrity. But today, Danny's eyes were different. There was a worry in them that she couldn't ignore. "Lila, there's something going on that I think you need to know," Danny said, his voice tinged with worry. "Travis Bell is trying to pull some people here into keeping quiet about what he's done." Lila froze, her expression hardening. "He can't win against us. Don't let him influence you. Be ready." Danny nodded, his eyes filled with defiance and resolve. He knew that if Lila was determined to go all the way, she would never back down. This city, with all its pain and sacrifices, would witness changes no one could have predicted. Lila walked back to her office, opening a hidden drawer and pulling out an envelope containing information from the internal investigations. Everything was ready. The evidence of Michael Grant's corruption, along with Travis' dark connections, had been carefully stored. Now, it would all be brought into the light. The situation was tense, but Lila knew that if she didn't act now, everything would continue to spiral out of control. She took a deep breath, slowly placing the documents on her desk, preparing to step into a fight with no mercy. Lila sat down, her mind filled with tension. The office was quiet, except for the ticking of the clock, sounding almost like a reminder of the time she had let slip by in order to formulate a decisive strategy. She stared at the computer screen, where information, evidence, and past strategies had begun to fall into a system that could change everything. In her hands, the files were ticking time bombs ready to explode at any moment. The voice from behind startled Lila, and she turned around. "You're looking for the truth, aren't you?" A middle-aged man with silver hair and a sharp black suit stepped into the room. It was Marcus Wilder, an experienced lawyer Lila had worked with for a long time. But today, what unsettled her was Marcus' gaze. It wasn't like before. There was something behind it, a warning she couldn't ignore. "Marcus, what's the meaning of this? You're not planning to stand with me in this fight, are you?" Lila asked, trying to maintain her composure, though her heart was pounding in her chest. Marcus sat down, not responding immediately. It seemed like he was also trying to find a more cautious way to approach the conversation. "I just want to make sure you understand everything that's happening," he began. "Behind all of this, it's not just a simple case. If we expose it, everything will change forever." Lila sighed, glancing at the documents on the table. "I prepared everything. Michael Grant, Travis Bell. I'm not going to let anyone escape responsibility for this. They think they can control everything from the shadows. But no, now I'll show them the truth." Marcus gave a bitter smile, his gaze examining Lila as if he were weighing every word she spoke. "Are you sure you can bear the price of this? The truth always has its cost, and once we push that door open, there's no turning back. We'll be up against the entire system. All of Charleston will hear what you're doing." Lila didn't hesitate. "There is no price I won't pay. The greatest price is silence, and I can't live with silence anymore. Marcus, I'm doing this, and I won't turn back." A soft knock at the door broke the tense atmosphere. Lila's secretary entered with an important announcement. "Judge Thompson, there's a call from the Department of Justice. They requested to meet with you right now. They received our documents." Lila stood immediately, feeling as though her body had been swept into a whirlwind. This was a decisive moment. This legal battle was not just about bringing justice to the victims. It was the beginning of a much larger change, a change that Lila would lead. "Marcus, I'm stepping out," she said, her eyes never leaving her computer screen. "Prepare yourself. What's coming won't just change Charleston. It will change the entire system." She walked toward the door, her heart filled with determination. This was not just her fight. It was a fight for truth, for justice, and for a belief she would never abandon. Lila walked out her office, her eyes sharp and full of resolve. Every step echoed through the vast hallways of the government building, a cold and imposing space. She could feel the tension rising inside her, as if everything were waiting for an explosion. She had no intention of turning back, no plan to stop. Once she set her mind on something, no one could change her decision. "Lila," a voice called from behind, and when Lila turned, she saw Judge Jackson Rivers, a senior judge from the Supreme Court, who had always regarded her as a protege, but had constantly questioned her decisions in the past. "Judge Rivers, you're here too?" Lila asked, unable to hide her surprise. "What's going on?" Jackson adjusted his glasses, his face serious. "You're stepping into a battle that no one can win. Are you sure you're ready for this? What you're doing will affect not just you, but everyone around you. You'll have a lot of enemies after you open this door." Lila stood still, her eyes never leaving his. She had known this for a long time. Sometimes, facing the toughest challenges is the only way to build a better future. And this time, she was prepared. "I am ready, Judge Rivers," she replied, her voice calm but full of confidence. "I'm not doing this just for myself, but for the victims the system has left behind, for the justice we all deserve. Judge Rivers stared at her, his gaze seeming to probe her determination. Finally, he let out a soft sigh, his tone softening. I understand, Lila, but never forget that nothing comes without a price. Are you sure you can bear that cost? Lila didn't answer right away. She turned back and looked toward the main entrance of the courthouse, where the sunlight streamed through the windows, casting long beams across the floor. She knew she had gone too far to turn back now. Then we will do what's right, no matter the dangers, Lila said, her voice resolute. She stepped forward, feeling the change approaching, not just for her, but for the very system she had fought for her entire life. Lila entered the courthouse, her hands tightly gripping the stack of files, her heart full of emotion. She could feel everyone's eyes on her, but no one knew that for her, this wasn't just a normal trial. This was her last chance to prove that justice would prevail, that despite all the obstacles, the truth would ultimately come to light. At that moment, she saw Travis Bell, the man who had caused so much suffering to innocent people over the years. He sat at the defendant's table, his expression cold and self-satisfied. Lila knew that not everyone could withstand the pressure when facing corrupt and ruthless people, but she was ready. She wasn't just doing this for herself. She was doing for all those who had suffered from injustice. Today's trial wasn't just a battle over laws, but a fight for the values Lila had always believed in. She could feel the imbalance in the system, where those in power always try to hide the truth, but she wouldn't let that happen. Lila, it seems like you're preparing for a fight that won't be easy, said James Miller, the CEO of a human rights organization, as he saw her walk in. We've witnessed many struggles, but this time it's different. Are you ready to face everything that's coming? Lila smiled, unwavering. I've faced a lot of tough situations throughout my career, but I've never given up. What I do today is for the victims who no longer have a voice. This is a time for justice to speak. As the trial began, Lila stood and began presenting undeniable evidence. Each statement, each piece of evidence she presented, made the air in the room heavy with tension. She looked at Travis, but he still wore that arrogant expression, unaware that his end was near. At that moment, Lila realized something important. Life is never easy, and sometimes you have to fight the entire world to do what you believe is right. The challenges she faced were not obstacles, but lessons that made her grow and become stronger. Travis Bell, Lila said, her voice firm. Not just me, but this entire system is responsible for your actions. You can't run forever. Justice will ultimately prevail. Lila was not afraid, and she knew that every step she took today would create change, not only for herself but for those who had lost faith in justice. The greatest lesson she had learned throughout this process was, no matter how difficult it gets, if you always stand up for truth and justice, you will eventually see the light at the end of the tunnel. The next day, Lila stood in the courtroom, ready to hear the final verdict of the case. She had mentally prepared herself for every possible outcome. But today, she could clearly feel that things were not going to be the same. After years of relentless struggle, today was a moment when justice would be served, not just for herself, but for all those who had suffered from injustice for so long. Lila looked down at the courtroom floor, where both the prosecution and defense were ready. All eyes were on her, the woman who had stood up against the corrupt power system. Her heart raced, but not out of fear. Rather, it was a new confidence that had grown inside her over days of fighting. Today was not just Lila's battle. It was a battle of everyone who had supported her through this long journey. Though justice was still being carried out, Lila knew that this was just the beginning. She glanced at Travis Bell, the accused, standing silently, his eyes filled with worry. She had witnessed his injustice toward the powerless, but now the system was responding. It had been a long struggle, but Lila knew that today's victory was a result of persistence, determination, and belief in justice. I won't stop here, Lila thought to herself. I will continue to work to change everything. We can't let these wrongdoings continue. The verdict was read. Bell was found guilty. Lila was not surprised. But the most important thing was that she had done what she had wished for all these years, to bring light to the darkness, to bring justice to the oppressed. And above all, She had created a milestone for those who would dare to stand up against injustice. This verdict was not just the end of a case, but a valuable lesson about the power of one person standing up, no matter the circumstances. Lila understood that to change a system, it's not just about changing one person, but changing the process, changing the mindset, and most importantly, building trust. There is nothing more precious than standing up and doing what's right, even if it means paying a price, Lila thought. She looked out of the courtroom window, where the sunlight filtered to the lush green trees, casting light on the towering buildings. A new life was beginning. She wouldn't stop here, and Lila's fight, with all that she had learned, would continue.